Man, she used to work for the Daily Wire. That's kind of weird to think about, isn't it? That Candace Owens used to work for the Daily Wire. And it wasn't that long ago that she worked for the Daily Wire. And now, I mean, obviously, since her position's on Israel, and let's just say her deposition in order to keep scooching to the right on matters of Judaism and otherwise have made it so she is not so interested in working with the Daily Wire, and the Daily Wire is not so interested in working with her. So she's gone off on her own. She's now has the Candace Show. And on her program, she engages in many types of interesting theories, like the idea that Emmanuel Macron's wife is actually a man. And she stood by that accusation so much and so consistently that she was basically like threatening them, like, go to court, do something. If you're really a woman, prove it. And then Emmanuel Macron's wife sued her. And then after they did that, she showed biological evidence to the court that she was a woman. And mind you, Candace Owens said that she would bet her career, very ridiculous thing to say, she would bet her career on Candace Owens's, on Emmanuel Macron's wife not being a woman, not being a biological woman, mind you. That's the framing. If she bet her career, then she should have retired. But she didn't. Of course, it's going to be something that, why are you trying so hard to prove it? Isn't that suspicious? Or, well, that isn't satisfactory. I need you to send me, not the courts, a picture of your... By the way, very interesting way, Candace, to get those photographs. Very interesting way, you pervert. Anyway, Candace Owens, when she's not ranting about the Jews or thinking about Emmanuel Macron's wife's, her box...
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
She's thinking of other things, other amazing theories to throw out to the people. I appreciate the sub. Thank you. Aspect of Katash and the primer. She is now on the spin and has been talking about that there's a bunch of smoke around Israel as a potential culprit, or their backers as a potential culprit. She had been saying for about a week or so that in the days leading up to Charlie Kirk's assassination, he had been building up more and more opposition to Israel, that he was not supporting them as much on television, on his show, that he was critiquing quote unquote Jewish donors, and he was out there not going out and playing defense for Israel. And that was due to a private transformation over the issue. That is what Candace Owens alleged, that he changed privately. And this is something we have to look into, because who knows why somebody really did it. Now, we could, of course, look at the motivations of the shooter themselves, and we could probably find that there doesn't seem to be much of a Mossad connection between the shooter and the Mossad, or the shooter's father and the Mossad, or the priest that turned him over to the authorities and the Mossad, or really anybody tied to this story and the Mossad. But that hasn't stopped speculation, because in the unknown, in the gaps between knowledge, one's imagination can run wild. In the age of clickbait and getting that attention economy, this type of stuff is king. And that's why I think she made the bet on Emmanuel Macron's wife being a man. Not because I think she actually thought he was a man. If she did, then she's actually off a rocker. And, somebody needs to look out for her. Maybe if they unplug her laptop, she'll forget how to put it back in or something. But I think a lot of it was, well, I can say this. I can get the easy followers and the dumb followers who would fall for something like this, who are going to watch stuff, consume stuff with not a lot of, let's say, forethought or review or self-reflection. And what's Emmanuel Macron's wife going to do? Prove it? Then she did. And that's kind of a problem for Candace. But let's listen to Candace Owens putting forward what Charlie Kirk was talking about in the days leading up to his assassination. This is before we're talking about the Israel side. This is her saying that Charlie Kirk told her that he thinks that they're going to kill him.
One more thing rather explosively. 3 people who told me off record, 2 people who have this in a written communication from Charlie, one who is a Turning Point USA donor, and I would say very much one of the white knights in this. The very day before Charlie Kirk died, he expressed that he thought he was going to be killed. He told these people, I think they're going to kill me. Okay. He did not express that to me. So I am telling you this based off the testimony of 3 people. And I am saying this because I hope that these people who I think are good will be inspired to come forward with that. Again, those conversations I had were off record.
By the way, when they say they're going to kill me, say the culprit, say the name, say the intelligence agency, or at least say the backers, the government, the something. They're going to kill me. Okay, well, is that it? Is that really all he said? Oh, they're going to kill me, and Charlie Kirk didn't expand on that at all about who exactly they is?
I honor that. If I say it's off record, it stays off record. But I'm hoping that watching what I am doing and feeling the energy that is rising across the world for people who want to know what the heck happened on 9/10, that, they will be brave and they will say, yeah, Charlie did the day before he died think that he was going to be killed, and maybe tell us, who is they? Well, for once and for all, who is they? Who is the they that he thought were going to kill him?
See, this just seems so perfectly attuned for the conspiracy. They, who is they? And if you are conspiracy brained, there's an alternative way she could have done this. She could have said, let's say Charlie did say this, didn't say this, I don't know. But let's say that you wanted to get attention and you went out there and you said, he said it was the Jews. Well, then if you think it's the Jews, you're going to be like, I knew it. I knew it. But then if you're somebody who thought it was the reptilians, if you're somebody who thought it was a different section of the deep state, if you're somebody who thought that it was XYZ, well, you're going to be treated a little differently. You're not going to be given the opportunity to create your own story with your fill in your old word puzzle where you can put in reptilians, Jews, immigrants, Antifa, and really whatever, cultural Marxism, woke, whatever you really want to in there. Now it's been chosen for you. By it being they, you cast the widest net possible. And so if you think it's anybody from the cultural Marxists to the Israeli Mossad to a certain religious group to a certain individual, you can place whatever you want in that fill your own adventure book. Now, look, Candace Owens then presents more evidence in the time that follows, which seemed to point in a certain direction about where Charlie was going before his death, that seemed to create suspicion within Candace. Specifically, a text that he put in a chat with donors. These are donors to Turning Point USA, where he talks about the possibility of bringing Tucker Carlson on his podcast. The donors who support Israel were not very happy about that. And then Charlie responded, probably miffed about the idea that somebody could tell him who to and who not to bring onto his podcast. Started saying like, oh, well, maybe I'll bring on like Candace, or, I can do what I want, XYZ. And this was not too long before he was assassinated, 48 hours.
And others knew that Charlie was done with Israel bullying him, and I am now going to present you proof of what I am saying. This is an actual group chat, which happened 2 days before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. There were 9 people in total on this chat, including Charlie and Rob McCoy. I'm going to protect the names of the other 7 for now. To be clear, I might actually release a name every day this week, but I want to show you this because suffice it to say, Rob McCoy was on this text thread, and I think it helps contextualize him as a person, in my view, that he would attack me for telling the truth about the pressure that he was facing. Take a look. So Charlie writes in this group chat, just lost another huge Jewish donor, $2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace. Somebody writes, oh. Charlie writes, Jewish donors play into.
By the way, for those who are curious, Rob McCoy is somebody who worked with Charlie Kirk with an organization called like TPUSA Faith in order to bring more, put the allegiance between the Christian right and the youth right, make it tighter, make it stronger.
$2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace. Somebody writes, oh.
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
True. All facts. PG Kim, thank you so much for the primer.
So Charlie writes in this group chat, just lost another huge Jewish donor, $2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace. Somebody writes, oh. Charlie writes, Jewish donors play into all of the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Then somebody writes, a donor writes, please do not invite Candace. That might feel good short term, but it's not good long term. In my opinion, like all groups, you're going to get a wide variety of opinions. That nasty free will thing that God bestowed on us makes life frustrating at times after the dust settles a bit, maybe. So again, this is 48 hours before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was very clear and he was very explicit, and he did not back down, not in that Hamptons meeting, which they're all lying about, nor in this text thread. I'm not going to reveal the names of the other 7. Actually, you know what? I disagree with myself 4 seconds ago. Let's just throw in Josh Hammer for funsies. He's on this chat, okay? So what are we to make of that? Okay, now that I'm showing you this and showing to you that the conversations were real, I want you to reflect, and it took me a lot of patience to allow the lies that were being woven and the misrepresentations of people that were pretending that I was just, high on lying about Charlie and the pressure he was under, the attacks that not just me.
Okay, let's say, and by the way, we do know that these text messages are real. So this part, whether or not they are going to kill me is true, I have no clue. But these texts have been confirmed real by staff at Turning Point USA. We will play some audio of that shortly. But the reason why people would default to Candace Owens being a liar is because Candace Owens has made part of her personal crusade lies like Emmanuel Macron's wife is actually a man, and I will bet my career on this. She then provides evidence that she is not, and well, if you bet your career on it, I try to take words seriously when people, I will bet everything on this, and then you're wrong. Okay, well, you had terrible judgment. It's one thing to be just wrong, but when you say you bet everything on it, you bet all of your judgment on it, what you're doing when you prove yourself wrong there is you're saying, I have the worst judgment imaginable. She either misjudged that she was actually a man or misjudged what exactly Macron's family was willing to do in order to show you up and prove you wrong. So if that's the most recent big news story in relation to you, is you getting it so wrong and being so confident about it on your show. People really get a lot of power and get a lot of viewership off of just saying things confidently. If you can learn to say things confidently and you can, broadcast that message out there, there's a decent chance you can catch a few fish. You can get some viewers. And she said it confidently, and it was, it was a crazy story. So people paid attention. She got viewership and then was proven wrong after she bet everything on it. So of course people are not going to immediately take you at face value, especially when you're not providing the evidence. I mean, why not just lead with the evidence? Is it that she didn't have this before, that since then someone provided her with this? Or was she sitting on this, waiting for people to pre-stake out their positions so then she could prove them wrong, which does have some sense to it. For example, you say Donald Trump has a letter where he draws a woman's body and then signs the pubes, and to Jeffrey Epstein where they talk about their secrets and how they're all enigmas. And then Trump denies it. After he denies it is when you release it. There's a strategy to that. So I'm not saying that there isn't any logic to it. I just don't know if that's what she thought about.
Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly faced for trying to stand up and tell the truth about what Charlie was actually going through. Why are you hearing it, though, from me and Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly? Isn't that weird? You got people that are hosting a show. Have they, in like one honorable thing, come out and said, like, you know what? F a couple of these donors who made his life a living hell in the last couple of weeks. Why haven't they done that?
Donors who were giving him money and then said, never mind? What do you mean made his life a living hell? I'm sorry to say this, but if somebody's giving you their money, that's like their option. That's like they were giving, and by the way, it was money to Turning Point USA, not money. Hey, we're going to give money to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, ooh, big Charlie Kirk donation. Charlie, I wanted to give you $2 million for just being Charlie Kirk, but I've decided to get... It's not like he's owed that money, as the always beautiful Subson pointed out in chat. It's a mistake to take this person seriously. Well,
it's also
people do.
Rabbi in that chat, like, why hasn't anybody made that move to at least say, to vindicate what I have been saying about what he was going through? That registers to me as very suspicious. I'm going to frankly say that. It's suspicious to me. It makes me think that in the same way that Charlie was being pressured by money, that you might be now run by that same money, that those same donors might be running you to correct the ship and to focus yourselves on eulogizing Charlie as something and someone that never once flinched, never once for a single second doubted the Israeli cause.
Now, I don't know about, the portrayal of him as somebody who never once doubted the Israeli cause. I've seen some Israeli politicians do that. I know Netanyahu has framed it in that way. But I mean, this entire scandal, if we're calling this a scandal, seems to be that Charlie Kirk was willing to associate with popular online figures like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, despite their anti-Israel views, and had been moving less favorably towards Israel privately. And then he died within 48 hours of this specific discussion. The only story here is that possibly he was transforming on the issue of Israel. That's the only story that we really have here. Because, why didn't they come out and confirm everything we said? Why do they have to? Oh, that's suspicious. Suspicious of what? Just suspicious, generally speaking? Or suspicious of a deeper involvement in something more nefarious? All these question marks left up in the air. But the one question mark that was resolved is whether or not these messages are real, with it being confirmed on the Charlie Kirk show by Turning Point USA staff that, yes, that was real.
Charlie was loyal to people that he had shared history with, right? He was asked, I think this may be what you were about to say, Blake, he was asked about Candace before in public, and he would always say, listen, we're friends. He would never say an ill word about her. And if people, tried to force him to do that about Tucker or whatever, he would always be defiant because he didn't want to be morally blackmailed.
Exactly. Charlie was loyal to people who had ever been friends to him, whether it was very old donors or just people who had worked with Turning Point.
Yeah.
And as long as they were not attacking him, he would not air any dirty laundry or, frankly, any disagreements he had with people. He did disagree with Candace on the Israel issue. He disagreed with Tucker on the Israel issue. But he also recognized Tucker had positions they agreed on. Tucker was a useful voice in the conservative movement on many things. And so he invited him to events, and, they were popular events. And so he would react. Sometimes people would just say, yeah, don't invite him, or we're going to, cut off some large donation. And that would make him angry. He would say this, yeah, as you say, this is moral blackmail. And he's this Scottish guy. He's combative.
Moral blackmail. Look, okay. If I am donating $5,000 to him, and then I find out Scott Ritter's been invited, or Mr. Hinkle or something like that, look, I think I'm going to take my money home, because there's a question of the type of values that I want to promote, and those don't align with my values. Now, there can be a question of maybe you find somebody on the margins, you can accept some disagreement. But when it comes to the type of politics that Tucker Carlson engages in, just like random accusations of like homosexuality against Obama and smoking crack with gay lovers, with like zero substantive claim, just like some random ramblings from some crazy person they found, as he goes out there and lies about the war in Ukraine, lies about the death toll on international television, on the biggest TV show in news politics at the time on Fox News, reversing the numbers, literally saying that for every Russian soldier that died, 5 Ukrainian soldiers died. Ridiculous numbers that he never corrected. It makes sense that he's like, look, I don't want somebody who lies about a war. I don't want somebody who makes propaganda for a foreign dictatorship. I don't want somebody who just airs completely bonkers conspiracy theories. He might get viewership, but that doesn't mean I need to help him get more. I mean, moral blackmail, call it whatever you want, but, people tend to be prudent with the money that they give.
Reaction to that is, the classic, like, screw me, no, screw you, that sort of thing.
He had, and it's one of my favorite parts about Charlie is just how like defiant and independent he was.
Yeah,
he was never going to
He could not be controlled by other people.
You could not buy him. He was not bought and paid for. You could not control him with money. It just wasn't the way he was wired. He didn't actually care about money that much.
And so what's going on here? What is going on here? You guys can look up what the text say. What is going on is Charlie, as I mentioned, he loved Israel. He cared about Israel. He cared about the Holy Land. And he was aware there was a surge of anti-Israel sentiment on the right. Charlie thought seriously about this issue and was trying to chart a path forward for people who were sympathetic to Israel. He was playing the good cop here. He was saying, you guys don't realize how bad it could potentially get. Mm-hmm. You have to change your PR. That's why he writes a letter to Bibi. You are losing the PR war. You need to change how you do your PR. You need to change your messaging to the American right. You might need to change what you expect from us, that you're not going to be able to count on just, for example, unlimited military aid from America. That's just not going to be tenable going forward. So maybe it has to be a more passive relationship. Maybe you need to give more support towards America. Some more support towards America in, for example, opposing Islamic migration into America. That's one thing he thought we could ally on. And he was trying to do all of this because he cared about the relationship and wanted to chart a way forward on it. And he would feel angry and upset when people would react to this by blowing up and suggesting he was an anti-Semite or a hater. He would get angry about that because he knew it was untrue. And then he would sometimes vent about this. Yeah. He would vent about this to people who understood that, who were pro-Israel people who shared his view on that issue.
Well, exactly. And just why I, didn't share this publicly, it was because this was a private message between Charlie and some people.
By the way, when we say like Charlie was transforming his position, it's not like Charlie Kirk all of a sudden thought Israel did 9/11, or that we shouldn't support Israel at all, or Israel should no longer be an American ally. Like the questioning seems to be, he doesn't like when somebody tries to control his events and say, we'll pull out money if you have X, Y, or Z person there. And Charlie Kirk probably focused on getting the most butts in seats, probably focused on getting the biggest names to the events, knowing that when you get big names like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens or whatever, people tune out to these things, get annoyed at somebody putting a speed bump or a road bump in the way of his planning, in the way of his political advertising, in the way of his political crusading. So that seems to be less related to Israel, irrespective of his comment of, you fulfilled the Jewish donor stereotype. Irrespective of that comment, the only thing that we're hearing here is that Charlie Kirk didn't feel like the weapons aid, not weapons sales, but weapons aid to Israel should be endless. Which, if you look at Charlie Kirk's position on Ukraine, which while a knuckle-dragging, window-licking position, one born out of ignorance, where he goes to the United Kingdom, goes to Cambridge, fucking Cambridge, or was it Oxford? It was one of the two. Goes to a prestigious school, debates a professor, and tells a professor and an audience to their face, So elections are canceled till the war's over in Ukraine, huh? Did Churchill ever do that? Goes out there and say, well, I maybe I'd support Ukraine, but the Ukrainians haven't really figured out federalist, representative Jeffersonian democracy yet. So I don't really know if they're ready. We were tarring and feathering people in 1776. Like 50% of American revolutionary activism was stuff that you would say is just horrible, violent crime and like taking over and fighting with police station. Oh my God. Like there's a lot of stuff that I don't know if you would necessarily define as Jeffersonian that was going tarring and feather, like in nature. I don't know if you would really describe it that way, but why would it have to be Jeffersonian? It's just his justifications seem like somebody who is following the crowd, which is crazy to think. But when it came to Israel, when he started to shift his position was what? When the vast majority of the American public did. And when the majority of the right-wing base turned against Ukraine, that is when he started to slam against Ukraine aid. So I can critique that position, but I can also acknowledge that if that is his position, that we shouldn't be giving endless weapons to Ukraine with no end to the war in sight, or at least that's his perception of the war, then you would have to also equally apply that to Israel, who after 2 years, today is the 2-year anniversary to the start of the war in Gaza after the October 7th terror attacks. I mean, it makes sense to be consistent, at least.
Jews and non-Jews, where he was, frustrated. He was frustrated. And that would have felt like a betrayal to my friend because he never said anything like that publicly in like a show, right? He said things with Meghan that were very, like we just played them. I went on Alex Clark's show and I felt like I did a faithful job of expressing what I believed his genuine feelings were.
So, what do I make of all this? Well, what I make of all this is that Charlie Kirk was shifting with the rest of the country. He was shifting with the rest of the country, generally against the continuation of Israel's war in Gaza, and generally against the ending of blank checks to Israel. That future support to Israel, if I was to guess Charlie's position, if I was to take the position of the church pastor putting AI words in his mouth, I would imagine that there would be some amount of position correlative to, well, if you need to continue after 2 years, buy them instead of expect them as aid. Don't be a burden on the American budget. Now, of course, we could talk about the big, beautiful bill and how that had an effect on the deficit, but you know how politics works. So I could imagine some call for that, or a continuation of American support would be contingent on certain asks. For example, taking Trump's peace proposals seriously engaging with them. And if it fails, Israel should make sure that it's Hamas that is the reason it fails, as in Hamas rejects the deal or otherwise, and not Israel. Especially if Donald Trump's negotiating tactics with Ukraine early on, freezing aid, freezing intelligence, constantly bashing the Ukrainians for starting the war that they didn't start, lecturing the Ukrainian president in the White House for something that he ended up being true about when it came to the Russians sticking to the commitments that they made, because they immediately violated all of Trump's ceasefires, not only the civilian ceasefire, but the energy ceasefire, within hours of it being made, within hours of it being negotiated. So I would imagine if you took 1/10 of that pressure that they put on the Ukrainians and you applied that to Israel, that would be quite contradictory to the position of certain donors to TPUSA. But if TPUSA can put butts in seats with people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and
Burns
can
is an
some
immoral,
small dollar donation,
morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much, Nechto CA, especially at a time where the Trump administration seems to be getting more frustrated with Netanyahu's engagement on peace arrangements. I think maybe they made the bet. He could have thought about making the bet. Look, The ones that will still donate to me will still donate to me. But if I take a more moderate position when it comes to Israel, I think it will not necessarily bear rotten fruit for TPUSA. And when it comes to popularity ratings, that would not be too surprising. When it comes to fundraising, when it comes to being welcome into certain back rooms within the Republican Party, I do not know. That's a different question. Either way, they killed him. They want to kill me. The they is still very vague. And all of the fingers are pointing in Candace Owens' Candace Owens. In Candace Owens' audience towards Israel, towards the Mossad, that they took out Charlie because they didn't want to see one of their bravest warriors join the other side or leave the pro-Israel camp, and they'd rather him leave while he could still be their martyr, which is the way that she's describing how they're talking about Charlie at the end, which she does not appreciate, and she talks about his late stage pivot away from the pro-Israel caucus. Look, all of this could be true. I believe that the texts are real. I believe that the pulling of the donations was real. I believe that Charlie Kirk wanting to maintain his relationship with Tucker Carlson and even possibly Candace Owens, as she is brought up in those texts. I believe all of that is real. I believe the negative reaction to that was real. And I believe he could have lost donor money over it. I can also believe that this happened within 48 hours of him being assassinated. What I do not believe is that it has anything to do with the shooting. The shooter has no ties to Israel, has no ties to Mossad. The people that they keep alleging that convinced him or indoctrinated him and such, which I don't agree with, but people who are saying that they don't have any ties to Israel, they don't have any ties to Mossad, his parents don't have any ties to Israel, his parents don't have any ties to Mossad. There's nobody in his life that has ties to Israeli intelligence agencies. And from the motivations that it looks like the man shot Charlie Kirk over, and the fact that he used a hunting rifle in hunting country, it wasn't like a particular, how would he get a gun like this here? He took his grandfather's gun. He took his grandfather's rifle and did it. I just don't believe it. I believe the Israelis would have done it more professionally. I believe that we would find some trace here. And I don't know if the Israelis would really pick somebody so young who would have, I would say, a decent enough likelihood of missing. Because if you miss Charlie Kirk, and then Charlie Kirk survives a political assassination, and he reacts anywhere near like Trump reacted, you're actually giving Charlie Kirk the biggest platform of his life. A bigger platform than he has ever had at any time, as people will tune into the Charlie Kirk podcast, as even though they missed, he'll have on a neck brace, he'll have some like bandages wrapped around one of his eyes, and he'll talk about how he was attacked, and how you need to stand up for the First Amendment, you need to stand up for freedom, and he would become a martyr, a living martyr, instead of just a dead one. Much better to be a living martyr.